So, what is shadow work, emotional work, inquiry? What does all this mean, right? What's the point of all this? So, in this video, I really want to introduce some of these concepts and really just talk about what's the point of this, right? And it doesn't really matter what your background is, whether you have any background in mental health or spirituality or meditation or any of that. It really doesn't matter what your background is. I really want to try to relate to a general audience here. So when we're talking about shadow work, ultimately, right, it's about the human condition. It's about the fact that we all suffer to a pretty large degree. We're just not usually connected with that suffering because most of the time we're very distracted. We're very caught up in something, whether it's work, relationships, hobbies, something that gives you pleasure, something that helps you avoid your feelings. But usually at some point in your life, something changes, right? Maybe there's a breakup, or maybe you lose your job, or you're just getting older and you're getting sick in some way. And all these fears and emotions just start coming up for you, and you start to really recognize that something is wrong here, right? And ultimately, what this channel is about is to kind of help you learn tools to work with these patterns, to kind of learn to feel more connected with yourself, to learn to process your emotions, to learn to give yourself support when you're triggered emotionally by somebody else, someone you're close to. And ultimately, we all want peace. We all want freedom. We all want to be ourselves. But we just have all these unconscious barriers, these unconscious emotional patterns that a lot of them just come from childhood, really. A lot of them come from our traumatic experiences that we have completely forgotten about. But the body's really holding on to all those emotions. And then we're all walking through life with our repressed emotions without even realizing it. We're just kind of tight all the time, right? I don't know if you noticed, if you ever try doing some meditation, what happens when you try, right? Most likely there's a lot of thoughts involved. Most likely there's a lot of really distracting thoughts, or just might be feeling a lot of pain, a lot of tension, a lot of restlessness, a lot of need to do something. And this is why meditation is really hard for most people. Really don't like meditation because of this. Because it seems like the point of meditation is to push through that and force yourself to stay still and focus on whatever you're focusing on. The problem is that you're actually fighting all those repressed emotions when you try to do that. So it becomes really hard, actually. And there's nothing wrong with you because of this. This is just the way that it is. This is just the way that we are as humans right now, due to our culture, our conditioning, all the patterns that we kind of inherit. This is just how it is. But it's not something genetic, though. It's not something inherently wrong with you. So it is possible, actually, to learn, or rather unlearn these habits and allow yourself to feel more authentically connected with yourself, with others, to kind of flow with life, not against life, and ultimately to feel more at peace. So that is totally a possibility here. And shadow work is really what that entails. So shadow work is looking at your shadow, looking at patterns that you're not aware of, which primarily are fueled by repressed emotions, because otherwise these patterns wouldn't affect you, right? Like if you didn't feel anything in the moment in your body, if it was just like a passing thought with no charge, it wouldn't be an issue for you. So why is it that we get compelled to act? Why is it that we get sucked in and now we're really struggling? It's because there's repressed emotions. So really the whole of this is working with repressed emotions. But a lot of the approach out there for shadow work, I've noticed, is just very intellectual, where you're kind of connecting with parts of yourself and having conversations. And sure, that could lead to a release, right? That can lead to a profound release, but it's kind of inconsistent and time consuming, and oftentimes can also reinforce patterns too. Being overly intellectual is actually a form of avoidance. Okay. Being overly intellectual to the point of going back up into the mind, creating stories. What's going on there? Because if you notice, when you're up in your mind, you're numb to your body. And it's really as simple as that, is that when we're up in our mind all the time, we're not aware of what's down here. And the mind is actually kind of serving an important purpose there. Because if we were aware of our feelings, especially all our repressed feelings, all the time, it would be quite overwhelming, actually. But if we kind of gently ease in and release, then it's always going to be gentle. If you kind of just trust it, it's always going to be gentle, especially with the tools that I'm going to provide here. If we just gently release, right, it's like you're dipping into a pool. You're not just diving into a pool. You're kind of dipping in slowly, 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 slowly until you're totally connected with your emotions and it's not a problem. And that is a goal that's available for everyone. But we have to first at least be willing to feel our feelings. And when we're used to just being divorced from our feelings all the time, which is kind of the state of our culture, right, for most of us, where we're just used to thinking about our feelings and not actually feeling them. Well, when we start to actually feel them at first, it can be a little strange because we're not used to it. But just kind of normalizing that. It's normal that it's a little strange, right? If you've been told your whole life to not look underneath the bed and you start to look, it's going to be a little strange at first, right? Because of all the momentum, all the people that have told you, don't look, don't look, don't look. Something bad might happen. It's scary. It's really scary. Don't really know why it's scary. We can't really tell you that, but something bad might happen. Well, if you look underneath the bed, though, you're going to have all that fear, right? Like, oh, crap. But what happens when you actually look, though? And you look underneath the bed and you see there's nothing there. There's really nothing there to fear, right? Well, your body might still have a fear response, but your mind starts to see, oh, there's really nothing to be scared of, right? And eventually the fear gets released and your body has no fear response anymore to looking underneath the bed, right? So this is just an analogy. But remember, when it's been like 30, 40, 50 years of not looking underneath your bed, you're going to have a lot of momentum to not looking. So that's why inquiry, it's basically, it's supercharging the curiosity. It's supercharging the looking. And looking is really what this is all about. Looking within yourself, seeing, recognizing, allowing what it is that's here, whether it could be just an emotion of anger or fear, sadness. It could also be a very valid perspective that just needs to be integrated. It could be a resistance pattern that wants to push away something, which is also very valid too. And just by seeing this, right, just by seeing it, you're making room for it and you're allowing it. So the allowing is not something that you can actually force. It happens very automatically. But by being willing to just see it, you're actually going against a lot of momentum that's saying, don't look, keep avoiding, keep doing whatever you're doing, keep thinking about it. And sometimes the pull is so strong, and I've been there many times, where it's like a part of you wants to look, but you just can't. And that's okay, right? I really want to normalize that. It's okay to not want to look. Because again, there's just so much momentum. Because it's the shadow, it's scary, right? It's underneath the bed, something, who knows what's underneath there. But just to really, again, normalize this, all that's within the shadow are patterns that you've kind of inherited or based off of experiences that you've had. Like, for instance, not wanting to be angry in the moment because there's a fear of being hurt, right? That could be a shadow pattern, a shadow, whatever you want to call it, like a shadow part or just a pattern, right? And that can be triggered by people who are angry, right? So like if people that are angry are triggering you, it might seem like it's that person, like that person's really mean. That person, I really don't like that person. But with inquiry and shadow work, we can start to see like, wait, could this be a shadow? Could this be a part of me that I'm not seeing, a part of my shadow that I really don't want to look at. And then you can start to just basically that sense of looking starts to open that shadow because you're really looking at it. You're bringing light to the shadow. That's the whole point. And when you start to look at it and you start to see like, oh yeah, maybe that person is just really angry and a part of me is afraid of anger because it feels like something bad will happen. And this, of course, connects to probably early childhood, which we all get these patterns. We all get these memories. And there's a lot of evidence, right? You might have been punished. You might have been really hurt with anger before. You might have been abused with anger before. So I'm not saying that that's false, right? I'm not saying that that's false, that anger can be hurtful. But when it becomes a belief, it becomes a lens through which you see everything. And now all anger is hurtful, and I'm afraid of it. When in reality, anger is a totally normal emotion that can be expressed in a healthy way without being hurtful. Or, I mean, sometimes it can be hurtful, but that's not even your fault, right? If somebody interprets the truth as hurtful, that's not necessarily your fault. But anger needs to come up sometimes. Sometimes you have no choice but to be angry, and it's very valid. But if that's not allowed because of the past, right? That can lead to a lot of anxiety, a lot of suffering, and now you really don't like that person because they're so angry, and I'm going to ruminate about them. Now I'm going to dwell on them and be really anxious. And every time I see them, I'm going to think about how I don't like them, but I'm not going to express that because I can't be angry. So you see, it just leads to so much suffering and turmoil because we get stuck in the pattern. So shadows, these parts of us, it's like we get stuck in these patterns, and they're trying to resolve themselves, but to no end. Really. They never resolve. So the way to actually resolve these patterns is what we're doing. That's the whole point of this, of shadow work, is to start to get curious. Could this be something about me? Can I feel into my body? Can there be a willingness to feel into my body and work with this pattern? And that's really what gets the whole ball rolling. I would say that's the most important part. The most important part is being willing to feel in and take responsibility for your feelings and to look at, could this be something about me? Could this maybe have something to do with these people at work that keep really pissing me off? You know, why do they keep pissing me off? What's that reaction about? And then you start to notice contraction in the body. And then you start to get even closer to that feeling. And then it can actually start to resolve because you're putting your attention on it. So I think as an introduction, I don't want to overcomplicate it, but inquiry is the looking. It's asking questions and looking, feeling in, inquiring into your experience. That's inquiry. And shadow work, emotional work, it's all the same. We're just working with these patterns within us. They feel very much like you. These patterns feel like you, and they've been there for a long time. So they don't really want to be disturbed because they're there to protect you. But at the same time, if a part of you wants to be free, to feel more peace, to feel more yourself, more authentically yourself, or maybe just more connected with others, more satisfied with life, if any of this interests you, then you're in the right place. But just be ready that it might be a little uncomfortable. But it is totally doable. Anybody can do this. I've never met anybody who hasn't been able to do this. Honestly, the only barrier is doubt. The only barrier is a sense of maybe I can't do this. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe it's too hard. I don't get it. And for years, I was stuck in doubt. So I know very well that pattern of doubt. And we can even just honor that pattern because it's such a powerful protector trying to give you certainty. But the truth is, there's never going to be certainty. And that's really what we start to see doing this work, is that underneath this is really a lot of fear of the unknown and a fear of uncertainty. And when we can start to just dip into that, again, very gently, like a cold pool of water. You just very gently dip in and you kind of come back, right? You start to actually tolerate the unknown and almost even embrace it fully because it's just how reality is. In reality, there is no certainty. And yet we can actually flow through life with that realization in a very beautiful way, in a way that I can't really describe to you in words, maybe one day. It's really hard to put this stuff into words. But learning to flow with life means kind of embracing the unknown, embracing the fears, allowing them. And you actually start to feel way more ease with literally anything. It could be with your relationships, with work, with your hobbies, just talking. I mean, literally everything will change because we're working on the roots. So shadow work, emotional work, working on the roots of our suffering, the roots of honestly a lot of what makes up your personality, actually. Not to say that you're going to change and become someone different. You're actually going to become more yourself. But a lot of our personalities, even like learned behaviors, like people pleasing, for example, right? You could say that's your personality. I'm just a people pleaser. But no, that's something you learned. And we start to really see that so much is learned that we take to be ourselves. It's like these masks that we learn to wear, and then we forget that these are masks. It's not really me. And then taking off the mask is a little painful because it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I kind of need this mask, right? So that's why inquiry, it's very gentle with this. We're not pushing that. We're not forcing that. It's not really about forcing yourself to let go. It's really about dipping in to your body and noticing that maybe a part of you, that there's a feeling that really doesn't want to let go. And maybe all you got to do is just make room for that. Like, yeah, I just don't want to let go. I just don't want to do this. And watch what happens when you allow that. Watch what happens when you allow yourself to not want to let go, to not want to do this, or whatever is coming up for you, whatever that fear or resistance wants to say. Watch what happens when you make room for it without changing it. I want to make another video on resistance, but this is ultimately about, can I allow the resistance to this moment? And you can do that, but you may not want to. That's okay. So yeah, so that's an introduction to shadow work, what the point of this is, and a bit of how to do it. Definitely check out my other videos. Feel free to post any questions and comments, and yeah, look forward to hearing from you.